When I was 17, I ran away from home.
How do you meet?
Well,
Oh, boy.
my first sight of Jimmy was in front of the lodge, kissing another girl.
Oh.
When this guy pulls up beside me and is like, "You're on fire."
It was caught on fire.
I sat down by the lake and cried because I thought I had failed.
Did crazy things happen at camp?
Yes.
Our first year, we didn't have it.
We kept looking at each other saying, did we make the right decision?
Is that why you're still here? Welcome to Changed Lives, a special limited series in which I explore the incredible stories of the people behind the scenes at Life Action, a ministry with a mission of reviving relationships through transformative events. Each of these individuals, my co-workers, have experienced God move in big and unexpected ways. The more I heard their stories, the more I thought, people need to hear this. In this series, you'll get a first-hand look at how God is working in and through the people of Life Action, the challenges they face, the faith that sustains them, and the lives being transformed along the way. Their stories are powerful. In today's interview, I'll be talking with Jimmy and Lori Herdklotz, two people who have a deep passion for families. Their heart for this ministry is so big, and they have seen God move in countless incredible ways. While you listen to today's interview, be thinking how you might play a part in changing lives. Life Action is fueled by the prayers and generosity of people like you. Maybe you'll feel led to partner with Jimmy and Lori, investing in the kingdom impact they're making every day. Let's dive into this conversation with Jimmy and Lori. So I am joined today by Jimmy and Lori Herdklotz, and I have been waiting to get you in the studio. I want you to just tell me what your role is here. So what do you do now at Life Action?
Well, I am the senior director of events. So any event that's happening, I need to make sure it's happening.
Okay. So is that events at the camp retreat?
Yes, it's at the camp,
Mhm.
and then we are looking at doing some, other locations and stuff like that, hoping to broaden that. But
Mhm.
I had a great team under me to do
Yeah.
that.
So all of the events, which seems, when you just say it like that, it seems like just the events. But the events, everything filters underneath of that.
Yeah.
We kind of do events.
Yes,
right?
that's what we do.
Yeah, so that's
it's
a really
lot
big
of-
title. Jimmy, how about you? What do you do?
I care deeply about discipleship
Sure.
and helping people follow Jesus. That's my passion, and that's what I try to do here with our staff,
Mm-hmm.
with our volunteers, and with anybody who attends something at camp. Encourage and challenge people to follow Jesus and whatever that looks like.
Great. It's also a big role. All right. Power couple.
Sure.
All right. So before we kind of dig in further to what you guys do here, I want to learn a little bit more about you. So Lori, I'll start with you. I
Okay.
want you to tell me, where you're from, where'd you grow up?
I'm from a tiny little town called Langsburg, Michigan. It's near Lansing.
Okay.
So just a couple hours from here.
All right. And what was life like growing up?
I am the oldest of 5 and I come from, all my siblings are adopted. I'm not. No, my dad used to say, we had you and we decided to try something different. He loved me. I grew up in what I didn't realize at the time. I thought it was normal, but it was a broken home. And my parents divorced when I was 17. I ran away from home.
You did.
I did. I ran away from home and lived with the family. Yeah, so it was a broken home, and our whole family, kids, everything got split apart.
Mhm.
And I finished my senior year at school, and that's when Life Action came to my school. That's how I got connected to that.
Okay. All right. And how about you, Jimmy? Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Traditional, conservative Christian home and culture.
Mm-hmm.
Was in church before as long as I can remember. Came here when I was 22 years old, came and worked a summer of camp. Didn't know anything about Life Action. Just a friend of mine said, hey, my dad's this camp director in this, camp in Michigan. I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
So I was like, I like outdoors. I like kids. Let's try that. So
Okay.
came up for a summer, and God just changed my life. Got a hold of my heart. I went back and finished college.
Yeah.
And came back and joined the
Okay.
ministry after that. So
So you grew up in a home that goes to church. Did you feel like you were saved at that point?
So I went to a Christian school,
Mhm.
and I was, I was inundated with the gospel and you know, and Christian teaching,
Mhm.
from before I can remember anything. So when I was in the first grade, my teacher said, "If you die and don't know Jesus, you're going to hell," and that scared me.
Mhm.
So I prayed a prayer. Um, I believe that, as much as I knew about Jesus, I placed my faith in him as a, 6 or 7 year old kid.
Mhm.
I didn't have any idea what that really meant to follow Jesus. I knew I just didn't want to go to hell.
Hmm.
I think I was saved at that time, um, but spent the next several years of my life trying to be a good Christian,
Hmm.
whatever that meant,
Mhm.
because that's what I thought we were supposed. It's all about the doing the things you're supposed to do and don't do the things you're not supposed to do, and that was the Christian life. But that's not what life was,
Mhm.
and so when I got into high school, junior high, high school, I was like really conflicted because I um, I was trying to do all of these things, but they weren't producing the life that I was expecting
Mhm.
that I was supposed to get out of this. So I kind of had lived a double life then. I
Hmm.
messed around with some of what the world had to offer,
Mhm.
but then in school and church, I'd talk the talk. When I got into college, and then and came here my first summer at camp, that I just here's what happened was I saw people that were living the things that I'd always heard
Mhm.
taught. That really kind of caught my attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Lori, back to you then. So, did you grow up going to church?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep, definitely a Christian home.
Okay.
Got saved when I was 5. And but kind of like Jimmy, where I didn't really know what that
Sure.
meant, and seeing it lived out and stuff.
Hmm. And then you had mentioned that Life Action came to your church?
They came to my school and church, and said they were looking for people. I had nothing to do, so I auditioned for drama, actually.
They had
And
drama?
I used
Tell
to
me how.
do well. They didn't end up doing it, but
Okay.
I used to do things like expressive readings, dramatic monologues. I thought, oh, I'll just do that. Knew nothing
Okay.
about live action, so I auditioned and made it, and I was so excited. And then I found out later that I was the only one that had auditioned, but
You were the best
so
one, though.
it was the best one. So yeah, that's what I ended up doing. I knew my dad couldn't afford a college at that point, and I
Okay.
was like, I'll just go do this.
So they came to your school.
They came to our
Okay.
school and did like chapels with
I see.
our school.
Okay.
And so it just looked like a fun little group, and I thought I could do this,
Mhm.
but I had no idea what I was really getting into, like not a clue.
And
No.
so, what was that like when you applied and then?
It was pretty fast. I was here like within a month or two. And I pulled onto the camp property, and I thought, here we go. Didn't have any idea that there was more than one team, that there was a whole headquarters of people doing it to get the teams out or camp, anything. I just thought it was this one little team I was joining, and I didn't realize it was a ministry. I am very administrative, and the camp director at the time, I just said I did it to get here, but he's
Yeah.
like, "Would you assist me then?" And so I moved into that role like within the first week.
Okay.
That camp director, it's different than it is now. He also traveled, so we were the ranch team.
Okay.
That was what the camp was called, and
ranch
so
team.
we partially traveled and went to schools and did
Mhm.
chapels and in the churches, but then the other part of the time we were either getting the camp ready or we were running camp.
And is it the ranch team that came to your school?
Mhm,
Okay, got it.
mhm.
Did you arrive at camp knowing what you were going to be doing?
No, I really had no clue.
Mhm.
I didn't know anything about this ministry, and like Lori said, I thought it was coming to a little camp. I didn't know that camp was part of a bigger ministry, and so I was just coming to do youth camp. I didn't even know what that looked like
Mm.
at that time, or what my role would be. So I was a lifeguard, and I helped we had horses back then. Because it was the ranch, so I helped the horse wrangler, saddle up horses and take kids around. And then I moved into a counselor role. I became a camp counselor.
Okay.
Yeah.
During that first
During
summer.
the first summer.
Okay. And you
Yeah.
were in college at the time?
I was in college.
Okay.
Yeah. It was the summer of my junior year.
Mhm.
So it's kind of, I was kind of looking for something just different to do. I knew
Mhm.
that the next year I was going to graduate, and I'd have to be an adult.
Get a real
And so,
job.
right.
Mhm.
And so I was like, what can I do that's just kind of different, and this thing kind of just popped up on my radar. I had no interest in ministry or really following Jesus. I knew that the party life was not where I wanted to go,
Mhm.
but I also was not like interested in really following Jesus. So I was kind of up here isolated from all my friends and my family.
Mhm.
And so God just kind of stripped away all of the things that I had been putting my confidence in
Mhm.
for life and fulfillment, and brought me to the point where I was just like, for the first time in my life, I realized that God was for me
Mm.
and not just, some old man sitting up in heaven waiting for me to step out of line so he could hit me in the head with a baseball bat or something. That's what just drew me to the place of just finally just surrendering and saying, God, whatever you want for my life,
Mm.
that's, I'm in.
That
And
happened at the camp.
yeah, it happened out of that camp. Yeah, which is why that place has such it's so important to me,
Yeah.
because I know what God's done in my life out
Mhm.
there, and then I've just seen it multiplied in so many other lives over the last
Mhm.
30 whatever years.
And you had hinted that part of that pull towards the camp was you were seeing people who were living out.
Yeah, the Life Action team members and
Mhm.
some of the staff, guys like Steve Campfield and others who didn't just talk about the Bible, but actually, live things out, especially things like forgiveness. I remember, playing basketball games and someone would stop in the middle of the game and say, "Hey guys, I just lost my temper. That wasn't Christ-like. Will you forgive me?"
Hmm.
And I was like, "That's what are you doing? This is a basketball game. Of course we lose our temper. That's part of the game, isn't it?" And so I'd never seen things like that. People really just extending and receiving forgiveness, really living in true obedience and call to repentance, just to immediately stop and say, "Okay, yes, God, I'm going to turn and make." I just saw people doing that, living that out, love and generosity in ways that I just never seen before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty radical.
It was radical. Yeah.
What was the year that you came here? Do you remember?
The first summer was 87.
87.
for me.
Mine was 88.
Yeah.
88.
And
Okay.
that's when I came back and joined.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, he just did a summer, went back to college.
Okay.
Then we both showed up in 88.
In 88. And what did you come back to do?
I came back to join the ranch team
To join the ranch team.
that
Okay.
Lori had referenced.
Okay.
So that was the team that was running the camp.
Mhm.
And the camp director and the ranch team director. So shortly after I'd come to this place of surrender and said, "God, whatever you want me to do," he said, "Would you be interested in coming back and joining the team?" Again, not knowing my place or what I would be doing or anything, I just was excited to be a part of whatever was going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So then how do your paths converge? How do you meet?
Well,
Oh boy, this is the fun story.
so we both came in 88 to do camp,
Mhm.
and my first sight of Jimmy was in front of the lodge kissing another girl.
Oh.
So I'd met this other girl the summer before, and we'd been apart. She was on one of the teams, one of the road teams, and I was away at college. And so I came back and I saw her and I greeted her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Kindly.
No,
Yes.
Uh-huh.
it was not a peck.
But this is the truth of the story, is that Lori saw that and said, "That's the man for me." So
So not part
that's-
of the truth.
that's
That's not part of the
So
story.
what was your first impression?
Neither of us really liked each other. Not like we hated. It just he did not impress me, and I did not impress him. We have a 5-year gap, and he says my 18-year-old showed, and
I was God had done this amazing work in my life, and I had spent the year just ready. I was coming back. I was on mission.
Yeah.
God was going to bring revival, and I was going to be a part of it. I just had this. And Lori was here, like she said, just because she thought this was a fun,
I was 18.
senior trip kind of thing. And so it wasn't I disliked her. It was more just like,
yeah.
Oh, we're not on the same path.
we got something to do, and you apparently are not on board.
As we spent the summer together, he really became like one of my best friends. There was another girl. 3 of us were just inseparable, and he really became my best friend.
Yeah.
And yeah, what drew me to him was I came from this broken home, and I was a mess when I got to Life Action. Still am a mess, but really dealing with a lot of things, bitterness and so forth. And Jimmy, there's only one other person in my life besides Jimmy that really would listen to me, but then also say, I hear you, but when you stand before God, he's going to ask you how you responded.
Mm.
And so he was making me realize I still answer for me. Things have happened in my life, fair or unfair, I still answer for me. And I really would get frustrated with him because I was like, I could make anybody else cry. But I could tell deep down he was trying to help me grow and draw closer to Jesus. And so I was drawn to that.
And what drew you to her after you guys became best friends?
It was really the friendship part, and for the first semester on the road, to me she was just kind of like a little sister.
Mm.
You know, I mean, there's a 5-year gap between us, so when it's just kind of like, but she was great. We got along, we had fun, um, but slowly I kind of started to notice that one, she understood things about, like she would tell me something about like something I was thinking or whatever, and I didn't even realize I was thinking it.
Mm.
And that just kind of started piquing my interest, was that, I mean, one, she's beautiful, so that got my attention, but also she understood things about me that I didn't even see.
Hmm.
And then two, just ways in which she served and cared for other people. Like she said, and you two are kind of similar. She's like, let's get things done. And so she can kind of come across as doing things, getting, let's accomplish whatever. But she would also just at times see a need in somebody's life and orchestrate things to help meet that need.
Yes.
In ways that other people didn't see, and that was pretty attractive to me too.
Yeah, she's very good at using those administrative powers for good.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you guys joined the ranch team, and then you head out on the road. And what was that early experience like of traveling with Life Action? And when you say ranch team, that it was just a youth camp at that point, or was it a family?
It was
camp?
youth camp.
Okay.
And that team was primarily youth focused.
Youth focused.
Right.
Okay.
So we would go to churches. Primarily, we go to a church that had a Christian school, and we would do chapels in the mornings with the students, and then in the evenings we would do a service with the church. We would go out for a couple weeks, and then we'd come back to the camp for a couple of weeks, work around the camp, and then go back out again. So it was kind of in and out a lot. It was fun because with the students, it was really intense discipleship and engaging with those kids, and in host homes, connecting with families. And often we'd be in a host home with teenagers, and so you're connecting with those kids as well. But then also we'd be back at camp. We just have fun eating meals together and, raking leaves or painting buildings or doing whatever.
Yeah.
I loved that variety.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you feel like God taught you about yourself in terms of living in community even? I mean, that's a very intentional community to live in, and probably, again, different than other people are doing life.
I was friends with people I never would have been friends with because I think that's to date. People would say that. You just learn how to work with people that you wouldn't necessarily choose. They really become family, and we wouldn't choose half our family. So I think navigating that, especially coming from a broken home, was very different for me.
Yeah.
Learning how to admit, just the whole issue of humility and admitting when I wronged somebody. I'd spent probably most of my life justifying my behavior, and so if I got mad at somebody, well, it's because they did something, they were a jerk, and so they deserved it. But learning to say, doesn't matter what they did, am I responding like Jesus? And so going back to people and saying, hey, I was wrong. That wasn't how Jesus would respond to you. Will you forgive me? That was huge. I think another big lesson for me was learning that it didn't really matter like what I did, what my role was, what my title was. It was more about who I was, who I was becoming, how my life impacted other people, regardless of my job description or title or anything like that. That was another big lesson in that time.
At what point do you decide you're in on this thing, and you're going to get married. How does that come about?
We traveled our first 4 years in Life Action. Is it 2 single, then we traveled married, and then I traveled married with a child. So
So we got married at the end of our second year.
Second year.
Yeah. I talked with the camp, our team director, camp director throughout the process, and
parents were good with it.
Yeah. And that it's, to some outsiders, that process might seem restrictive, but like talk about the heart behind that, about traveling with young adults and maybe having to have some kind of guardrails.
The guardrails are definitely different. It was pretty
Yeah.
strict back then.
Okay.
But the heart behind it, I think, has a lot to do with it's invasive in a good way. Like they want to be a part of our lives and they want to walk us through it and they want to I think that's the heart behind it.
yeah, and I think two things. One, protect us from ourselves, because in that environment when you're together so much, it's not like, when I was in college and dating a girl, I'd see her maybe once or twice a week, and it was just not. But when in this culture, I mean, we are together all the time.
Everybody falls in love.
And
Everybody.
and so there's got to, there's a little bit of protecting us from going
Tunnel vision.
off the rails, and then two, because it's a community, our that dating relationship impacts everybody. I've seen couples that just because of their relationship was divisive in a team. In fact, we have often said, even in our years working with team members, one of the most divisive things on a team can be couples relationships. So
That's interesting.
yeah.
So you get married and then you decide to stay traveling. Was that a common decision people made, or once they got married, did they usually come off the road? Do you remember
Usually
that?
off.
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to remember where we got married and traveled, and then there's a year where that camp director decided he was going to start his own ministry because Life Action had decided we weren't going to do youth camping, where we were going to focus on families because we wanted to hit the whole family. And it wasn't a upsetting thing. He had felt God was leading him to youth.
Sure.
So he went to start his own ministry, but the entire team picked up and went with him. And Jimmy had decided God had called us to Life Action, so we were staying put. So at that whole beautiful property, it was like crickets.
Yeah, tell me about that time.
I don't know if I was scared. I think I was numb. My best friends were leaving, and we were staying. And it's a big property when you're the only one on the property.
Sure is.
At that time, there was a thing, they were called the White Team, and it was the one-nighter team. So they went into 5 churches a week.
We had 3 multimedia programs that we did.
Okay.
And it was a one night.
In and out, very hard. So we always said we would never do White Team because that is hard. And we had a 1-year-old. Wow. We were like, well, he called me and he goes, "You'll never believe who called me." And what he asked, so he told me, Dan asked us if we'd go travel the White Team. I said, "Well, what'd you say?" He goes, "Well, I told him I'd pray about it. We'll call him tomorrow and tell him no."
Genuinely, he asked me to pray about it, and I said, we'll do that.
Sure.
But there was no way we were going to travel because this team, their schedule was grueling. It was.
And I had a baby.
And we had, all right. So it was like, that's not what.
Fast forward, and God obviously had different plans, and we went out.
Yeah, you called back and said, okay.
Yes. And I will say, in all our, where we're at 37 years now, it's still one of my favorite years. And we could sit here for another half an hour and tell you all the things that went wrong and how just
all the challenges,
trials,
and,
but that was a close team, and it's because of what we did.
Why, if you had to pick one story or pinpoint, why do you recall that year with such fondness?
We really did go through a lot. Like for 2 weeks straight. How many vehicles do we have out there?
3 vehicles at the time, and 1 vehicle broke down every day
single day for 2 weeks. Nonstop.
And
I was driving down my motor, it was caught on fire as we're going down. I mean, it was.
Yeah. This guy pulls up, I'm driving the motorhome, and this guy pulls up beside me and is like, "You're on fire."
Yeah, we have some big stories.
Yeah. So Lori was also expecting,
but
was in the process of actually losing the child because it was a difficult situation, but we didn't know at the time. She's expecting, but just like really sick, can hardly get out of bed.
We would go into a
Just-
different town every day, and he said I would always look for the emergency.
Like the little hospital sign.
Mhm.
He
Just
never
because
told
I-
me that till
because
later,
I
but
was-
just to watch for it
Because I knew that in the middle of the
we
night we
often-
might have to get up and go find a
we
hospital.
had to go do that a couple times. So it was this trial, but then our team came alongside us and loved on us.
When you experience things from, challenges from outside, it brings you together. And that team we just rallied around each other,
Yeah, it's a close-knit team. So then the next year, I would have traveled again. I love that team, but financially it wasn't making sense to keep us out there, so they brought us back. So we were out for 4 years, and then we went to camp, and then it was 20 years there.
Okay. So you had your experience on the road and then you come back to camp. What are you thinking you're going to do then back at camp?
At this point, I think we knew we were doing family camp, but we had no idea what family. No, nobody was doing this at the time, and there was no Google to go see, what's family. What do you do
Yeah.
family
Had to
camp?
figure it out.
I was going to be doing program activities.
Mhm.
It was a small staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
But not a ton of people were coming to family camp.
Oh,
Were there a
No,
few?
no,
no.
the
And in fact, the
first-
first summer
Did we cancel the
we
first?
canceled. We had three people sign up.
Okay.
3 families sign up. The first year that we did it, we had 18 families over the course of 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Okay.
So
Still very small, but
Yeah.
but our staff was small, and we just all hung out. It was really
Did
fun.
it all together.
Really fun.
It was almost like a retreat
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
and again, we were making it up. So
as
yeah.
you went.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like I remember, so I was the activities
Yeah.
director, and I'd come from doing that with youth camp. So where youth camp is like,
Very
you wake up at 7 in the morning, banging trash cans and blowing bugles and getting kids, and it's activities and going. And we did this week of family camp, and it was just very low key. Like I remember the second day of camp, I went out behind the lodge just to kind of observe what was going on, and there's families just sitting at the beach and a guy reading a book, and it just seemed just so boring. And I literally sat down by the lake and cried because I thought I had failed as a activities director. And then later on, I was talking to one of the dads, and I was just trying to pick his brain. I was like, "Hey, tell me about this week," And he goes, "This has been the greatest week of our life." And I was like, "You're kidding?" And he goes, "I got to take a nap. I was able to read a book while my kids were, and I got and I realized families families go all the time.
Mm.
They wanted a week where they could just really be together. It was really encouraging to me to kind of see that. But yeah, at first, man, I thought we really missed the mark here.
Yeah. Well, that seems like a really important lesson, just that concept of rest and renewal. Now, as you look back, knowing that like that's a pretty integral part of spiritual formation.
Yes.
Back then you're thinking, I got to have something for them to do.
Yes. Yeah.
Not knowing that actually what God wanted them to do was sit on the beach and
Yes.
reconnect and rest. Did you go into then at being at the camp with that mindset shift, like that in mind when you start creating what the camp experience is like?
I think it's a few years in
Yeah.
before we kind of stopped and evaluated. Some of us on the camp team just stopped to look at what we were doing
Mhm.
and how it really fit in with our big mission of renewal and revival. Some families would come every year and they'd have a great week and they'd talk about how great it was, and then they would come back the next year and they would kind of look the same,
Mhm.
And I thought, how are we really impacting the world, with this? And so that's when we kind of started to think through kind of our threefold mission of creating context where people could pause, and just disconnect from the hustle and bustle of life, reconnect with God first, and then with each other, and then make a focus towards now go home and engage your community with the truth and the love and the things that you've experienced in this week. Take that out. And so that's where we came up with pause, reconnect, and engage. It took a few years for us to kind of figure
Sure.
out this is what we do, and this is how we do it, and this is how it can be effective.
When you think back on camp life, you're here for 20 years. What are some of your memories that just pop into your brain when you think about that time in your life? And maybe it involves you're raising a family out there, or the people you're working with, or the families that are coming.
raising our family, our kids thought they owned the camp. I will say that. The kids do. They think, I mean, they grow up there, so
Yeah.
they think they own the place.
And when you say grow up there, I mean, you actually lived on the camp
On
the
and
camp.
still do.
Between the two of us, since we've been here, we've lived outside of the new buildings. We've lived in almost every building on the
Wow.
camp property, whether it was single or moving or And Austin, that he's now the cook at the camp. He the water slide used to be between the two chalets, and we
Right
walked
behind
past,
where we lived.
we walked past one day, and he was at the top of the water slide, and he would stop every person. He'd go, "I want you to know that this is my water slide, but I'm going to let you slide on it." We were
Very
like,
gracious of him to
"Oh my
allow
goodness."
other
At
people.
family camp.
Excuse us, and
Yeah.
grabbed him, and so that was the mindset, though, of just, hey, I own this, but I'm going to be nice and
Yeah.
let you use it.
Yeah. Y'all can be guests here for
Yeah,
a little while
yeah.
if it's okay
So,
with me.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so that's family-wise, it was a great opportunity.
I think the other thing about family was having our kids be able to do ministry with us and see the impact of it was huge. So I loved that we'd do a father-son retreat, and I would go do an activity, and I'd take one of the boys with me. Those kinds of things were, I think, I'm super grateful
Yeah.
to be able to have done that.
I think what I love about camp part of it is the families that just came back year after year after year, and we would literally get excited and be like, "Are you guys coming in a day early? We're going to grab pizza." It just became friendships, and many of them, like he said, we were hoping for life change. Some of them, you'd see their relationship with their kids were better, or just things like that. When I can see the after effects, not just the week of camp. Everybody has an experience at camp, but to see them come back and that they're growing and stuff is very exciting for them and for us.
Yeah, and some of those kids are actually now bringing their kids, which
Right.
makes me feel
Which is
really old.
really
But,
exciting.
yeah, it's pretty incredible.
And did you remain as the activities director throughout that time?
Activities director for a year or two, I think, and then the guy who had come in to be the camp director, he left. It just didn't feel like that he was called to that, and he left to another ministry. And I had a real passion for where I felt like I wanted to see the camp go, and some things that I wanted to. And so what I was afraid of was we kind of had a tendency back then in Life Action to, if we had a warm body, we'd plug them in, whether or not
Very
they
true.
were
Whether
a
they were
good
good
fit
fit.
for
Very
that.
true.
I wrote a letter to our leadership and said, hey, I would be willing to be the interim camp director so that we can kind of take our time and find the right person, knowing that it's probably not my best fit for long term. But I was the interim camp director for about 7 years. And then they took the interim part off because people kept coming to me and asking me, when are you going to not be the interim camp
Right.
director?
It was
When are they going to find
it
a
was
camp director?
Well, I think a lot of people thought that I should
You
just
just were.
assume that role.
Yes.
And but I knew there's a lot of things about
Mm.
camp director role is not my
Wheelhouse.
yes, right. So we removed the interim, but so I was the camp director, but all along knowing between me and the leadership that was not what I want to
Keep
do
looking.
forever. But I was in that role for about 15 years.
Yeah. Wow.
And by God's grace, had a lot of great people around me
Mhm.
that, Lori did a lot of administrative
Yeah.
stuff, even though she wasn't officially on staff. She still helped kind of organize and execute a lot of things. And we had a great team with us throughout that. Yeah.
I love it. Lori, can you talk about what he just mentioned about you not officially being on staff, but doing a lot? Like, talk about how that's actually kind of baked into the culture of Life Action, like families serving together.
It's just more of a, when there was a need, like a lot of wives will I can list a bazillion people and where they're gifted and stuff and would step in and help. I think that the families that have been here a long time, it's when the wives stay involved. Otherwise, it feels like your husband's going off to work.
Yeah.
And so when you're doing it alongside, and everybody has a different stage of life. When I had younger kids, I had to figure out a way to help, but I was still at home. But I've pretty much always been involved since I joined. Partly my personality, I just can't sit still.
Right.
I think it benefits them greatly to be involved, whether it's a weekend over 3 months, that's still being involved. It doesn't mean you have to, but meeting them where they're at. I talked to one family and she's like, I've got young kids, I can't be involved, but she was feeling like she was missing out. And we came up with a plan of giving her the list of all the campers' kids that were coming per week, and she would sit down with her kids in her home and pray for each one of those kids that were coming to camp. So there's ways that you can get involved with whatever stage of life, and I love that. And Life Action encourages that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Did crazy things happen at camp?
Yes.
You're trying to figure out which one.
Which
Which
one?
is appropriate?
Probably
to
the
share?
fire, the ring of fire.
Ring of Fire would be
The name itself, I'm very anticipatory.
father-son event, and we always have like some kind of theme. And this theme was on the armor of God. One of the activities was the guys had built this little, maybe 15-foot circle of, just twigs and brush and stuff. And they were going to light it on fire. And then the idea was you're going to take the shield of faith and lay it down, and you could walk across, so everybody's in the middle.
Good concept.
It was pretty pathetic. It was like this little bitty fire. You
Sure.
could step over it, so it didn't really get the effect. So the guys thought, what we'll do is we'll add some accelerant, and so I think they, put
course.
some diesel fuel or something, but they didn't test it before we did it live. And so there's this group of dads and sons. Unfortunately, at least one of our staff was in there, and they lit this thing on fire. Well, it just blew up and created like a cyclone, like a
Yes.
of fire. And so
We had our lawyers.
most of the guys kind of ran out. There was one kid that was in there and kind of panicked. One of our staff guys, Spanky, grabbed him, and they jumped out, and everybody was
They were
fine.
in the fire.
They were in this ring
The
of fire
ring of fire.
with it burning up,
Oh, they weren't just watching. They were
No,
inside
they
of the
were
ring.
in it. Yes. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did you all often try activities without testing them first?
No.
Well, not Jimmy.
It had actually happened before that, where I had said we'd done a few things, and I had said, guys, we have to test everything we do. So they had tested the initial ring of fire.
Sure.
Just didn't think about we're adding an element to it. We probably should retest
Should
it. So
retest it.
at one point I said, okay, guys, we're not going to do anything else that starts with, let's see what this will do.
That was his mom. Jimmy has a lot of mottos.
Yeah.
So the camp life sounds fantastic for the time that you were there. So how do you leave camp and go somewhere?
So kind of back to the story about interim camp director.
Yeah.
Mike Lee had joined our staff a few years into this, and we saw pretty quickly that Mike just had he was gifted administratively and leadership and with fundraising and the things that a camp director really should do. So about 2 years after he joined, he moved into the camp director role, and I moved into what my dream job was camp pastor. So I was going to be able to focus on discipleship and teaching and mentoring and all of these things that I was so excited about.
And that's when the camp really took off.
And we were growing. I mean, Mike did a great job of just kind of helping lead us to expand our facilities and grow our programming and everything. And things were really going great. I loved what I was doing. And about 2 years into this, we just kind of by chance went out and filled in for one of the road teams for one event. It was just a week thing. We kind of did it for a substitute thing, and it went really well. But we just thought that's just something we can kind of help with maybe every now and then. They called a year later and said, "Would you be willing to come out and do this?"
I was pretty
join the road.
excited because I love change. I love change.
Yeah,
I
sure.
wasn't unhappy. I loved camp.
Well, my
But I-
response was similar to the previous one, where I said,
No.
"Sure, I'll pray about it," but in my
He
mind, there's no
loved-
way.
He loved his role.
The camp ministry was blowing up and was going great, and I loved what I was doing, and there was why would I leave any of that? But as I prayed about it, I just felt like it was something that God wanted us to do. And it was at that time, it was a 2-year commitment. We were going to do this for 2 years. We're going to come back. We're going to be at
Go back
camp
to
again.
Okay.
11 years later, we're
Right.
still out there.
Right. 2 years turned into 11 real quickly there. So you were kind of excited about it because
I
you wanted
was,
to change.
yeah.
And how many little ones did you have at that point?
We had 2 grown then at that point.
Okay.
We took our senior, he was a senior, and we had him go out on the road, which he
Okay.
loved though. And then we had 2 younger. So we took a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old out. My 6-year-old, who's now going to be 20, he's still out there. And he said, Mom, do you realize I've been out there my entire life? So they live differently than my other older two that grew up at camp.
Yeah. The older two grew up at camp. The
Mhm.
younger two grew up on the road.
Mhm.
Yes.
And
much.
how many of the 4 are still involved with Life Action?
3 are still involved with
Yeah.
Life Action.
And our
And
other
our-
lives 15 minutes from. One thing I
great.
do love, and I think I give Jimmy all this credit. One of our fears is, people have kids that just hate the ministry, whether it's church or whatever, because of what it did to their dad or something.
Mhm.
And he's always taken them alongside, and all of our kids just love ministry. Even our one that's in a secular still loves it, and came out and helped in a retreat a couple weekends ago. So Austin, when he was in the Marines, came back. When he got the job, he walked back into the lodge. He's 28 when it happened, and he just threw his arms out and said, "I'm home." And so that was kind of neat that's the older two, and the younger two are definitely road kids.
Yeah. So what was road life like? Were you on the blue team?
Blue team.
Okay.
Mhm.
And now you're back out there. You've had this experience at the camp. Now you are seasoned Life Action
Hmm.
members, and you're going back out into the team in a different role, right?
Yes.
Yep,
Because
different
you're
role.
serving the family or serving the team members,
Yes.
right? And the
Yep.
families.
Mhm.
Okay.
I think we didn't think we'd traveled our first years. We knew Steve, who we were going to travel with. We
Mhm.
knew Life Action, as you said. So we were like, yeah, it's going to be a little change,
Mhm.
but we got this.
Mhm.
And our first year, we didn't have it. It was very different. When we make fun of Steve and Debbie, they've been out there their entire life, so they don't know what to tell you because for them, it's old hat.
Everything's intuitive.
Everything's into
Right.
So we would be making wrong. Like we were like, yeah, we tried to have dinner. We pulled up. And they're like, oh, you don't ever want to do that. Well, we know that now, And so we joked about that kind of stuff. We had a lot to learn. The speaking was different. You had a lot to learn there.
Communicating from platform, which I had not done a lot of. So I was learning how to do that. And there were a couple sessions that I did early on that were just awful. Like I walked off the platform and crumbled up my paper. And so it was starting over. So
But Steve walked you through it.
Steve helped me
He
learn a
grew
lot through that.
ton. Yeah.
We knew we would love the
Discipleship.
ministry, the discipleship with the team members.
That's what drew us.
We'd always had a passion for that and always found ways to do that. So that part we knew we would love and were excited about.
Yeah.
The teaching was a challenge, learning how to just
Trailer life.
it's trailer life, living in a trailer, tearing that thing down, driving, setting it up every 2 weeks. And but there is a real rhythm to it, but you have to learn it. And so
It took us longer than we thought.
that took a while. Yeah, it did.
What impact did it have on your marriage?
We learned that you can't fight loudly because everybody can hear everything. Like we had a big one, and we were like, Steve and Debbie probably just heard that entire fight. So
Yeah.
You're in a bubble in the trailer, so even our kids can just hear everything. I love doing ministry with Jimmy, and he brings me alongside, and so doing it together is, I think, what we love more than anything. So
I think for me, it was some of the principles, the things God was teaching me. We'd had a pretty big argument and fight, and I was frustrated because I lost my temper, walked out, slammed the door, and I was really frustrated with myself. And I remember saying to God, it's not fair. It comes easy for some people because that's their nature. And God said to me, and I'm pretty sure He used this word too. He said, "Bingo," because I learned that being a good husband, being a good leader on the team, wasn't about the things that I did or didn't do. It wasn't about behavior modification. It wasn't about not losing my temper. It was about becoming patient. It was about becoming kind so that those things would naturally flow out of me. And God used those years on the road really to show me a lot of what was on the inside. Go to work on that. And instead of just thinking, okay, Lori's making me mad, don't yell at her. Instead, trying to become a person who was just patient and kind, so that it was just not natural anymore to yell or to slam doors or to those kind of things. And not that I'm learned it all and I've got it down, but that was a big part of my personal transformation over that that time, which impacted, I think, our marriage and my parenting
Mm-hmm.
and my dealing with people in all kinds of ways.
Yeah. And as a counselor and a pastor, then, did that change how you counseled marriages and families?
Yeah.
I mean, anytime you're learning, it's
Mhm.
going to be, you hope
Yeah.
it's going to be an overflow, so yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And one of the big, like kind of core values, right, of Life Action is humility.
Mhm.
And so probably being able to show your life and walk it out in front of others lent you some credibility in that area too.
Well,
Because
humility and honesty or
Mhm.
transparency. So, yeah, being humble enough to admit I was wrong
Mhm.
and being transparent and honest enough to tell people, those
Like,
stories.
Mhm.
Yeah.
that was amazing to us when we would teach. If we would just share we fought or something, I was amazed at how many
Yeah.
people were like, I can't believe you said you fought. And I'm
Right.
like,
Yeah.
just because we're in Life Action, just because, whatever, we're human. I mean, not just, oh yeah, we
Yeah.
said something. No, we're human. And so the transparency is key to me.
Mhm.
Very key.
Do you think that that message is what seems so radical or has to churches maybe that we would visit throughout the years?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Very much.
Based on responses that
Mhm.
people,
Mhm.
that's probably the number one thing that I
Mhm.
heard from people on the road was, thank you guys so much for your transparency.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that's one of the just radical parts of our message.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How did churches respond to that intentional pause? Like inviting us to come in for 8 days, 10 days, 15 days.
Mhm.
Like, how did you see that transform communities and people during your time out on the road?
There's a lot of unintended consequences to one of
Mm.
our events, and one of them is that it really did foster community.
Hmm.
Um, churches coming together every night for an extended period of time just would develop friendships and relationships that people didn't have before,
Mhm.
people that were acquaintances before. One of the things that we would hear often is Steve and I, our leadership, would meet with the church leadership
Mhm.
pretty much every day throughout the event. And one of the things we would hear that was surprising to them was there's two things. One was the people that didn't come that they thought would be
Hmm.
a part of it. And then the other thing was the people that they did not think would be a part of it that did. And I think there were people on the periphery of the church that would sometimes be drawn in, and it would create connections and bonding and community in that church. Are encouraging the openness and the honesty between each other
Mhm.
would go a long way too.
Mhm.
When church leaders would stand up and say, hey, here's where God put his finger on in my life,
Mhm.
and to see the church gather around them, respond together, that those kinds of things would really foster a real deepening of community. I think a lot of churches we were in were used to kind of a, hey, we have our annual revival,
Mhm.
and this is another,
Yeah,
just
true.
this is that again. We're
Yeah.
gonna have these people in, and we're gonna
Mhm.
do this thing, and
Mhm.
it'll be neat for a week,
Mhm.
and we'll bring our lost friends, and hopefully some of them will get
Mhm.
saved. Most churches, that was the anticipation.
Mhm.
In fact, one of my favorite things was often to hear the surprise
Mhm.
when people would say, "I thought this was for my lost friends and neighbors, and then now I'm finding out it's actually for me."
Yeah.
Was pretty cool.
Now it's different if we go back to a church.
Sure.
That's a
Mhm.
whole nother
Mhm.
ballgame because they know what to expect from
Mhm.
us at that
Mhm.
point.
Yeah.
And it's similar to like family camp.
Mhm.
You have these relationships and it's fun to see people,
Yeah.
and even host people are begging to keep the same kids they had and stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's a different feeling.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
You touched on the discipleship of the students that travel with you, and I know that's near and dear to both of your hearts. Like, these became your kids, right? And so talk about why that was such an important part of your ministry.
I think we both, since day one, we got
Mhm.
married. Like even when we weren't out on the road, those team members, when we were at camp, they were at our house. Like it
Mhm.
just, that's always been our draw of investing in them and walking alongside them. And
Mhm.
between the two of us, we've hit everything that they're probably dealing with because we were such bad kids. But it's
Uh,
so beyond exciting to watch the light bulb come on
mhm.
and to yeah, to just see them move and grow. There I go. Develop and to seek Jesus and to grow. That's just worth it to me because it's not fun all the time. You have team members who are just punks. Can I say that? But that's what makes it worth it because those are lifelong. Like she's gonna take that. She's gonna become a wife and a mom, and it's just gonna that ripple effect for me
Yeah.
anyway. And some of these stories these kids were coming from, I just it breaks your heart. Like
Yeah.
some didn't have a place to go for Christmas or, all those things. And so
To watch the transformation in somebody's life is incredible, and to be able to be a part of that to some degree is awesome. I think for me, part of it's because it's what God did in my life.
yeah.
At that stage, there's
Yeah.
that phase of life. There's so much hunger
Mhm.
to understand themselves, to understand life, and so we're in an environment where you can help them process that, which is great. But that's what God did for both of us,
Both
coming
of
into
us,
this
yeah.
ministry, and so to be able to pass that on. Sometimes you don't see the response and the change. And I remember one year in particular where I was really frustrated with we had a good team. We had a bunch of guys that were good guys, but no one was really just like driven to really follow Jesus and they were just, we're here to do our thing this year and this will be good. And I remember being just really frustrated with that and talking to Jesus about it one day and just saying, how do I do this? What I do? And Jesus reminded me of this. He said, Jimmy, the number one call that I gave to people when I walked this earth was to follow me. It wasn't to get saved, and it wasn't to, to change your world, and it was just follow me. And Jesus said, Jimmy, I'm calling you to follow me. And then, like Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. The draw to me, and still is just to say, I'm following Jesus. I want to know what it means to look like him, to become like him, to experience his love, and to pass it on to other people. But also then just to say to other people, hey, follow me as I'm following Jesus. That's just a big, huge draw. And some people do. And just like with Jesus' ministry, some people didn't.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a lesson we had to learn.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't okay for me. Like for a long time, it was like I poured and poured and you just don't get it. You don't want to shake it. And parents understand that. But it's not my job to fix. It's my job to live out, and teach. And so that's a hard one when you pour and pour and pour and no change.
And you've probably seen, because you've been a part of it for so long, maybe kids that weren't impacted at that moment, weren't following at that moment. Seeds were planted.
Yes.
That
And that's something we had to learn.
later
Yes.
They come back and say, I saw what you were doing.
We've been contacted, and saying, sorry, I gave you grief, and this is what God's doing in my life now. So it's very much what you said about the seed. But again, when in the middle of it, you want to see it. But sometimes it's just the seed and doing what God asked you to do and trusting him for the outcome.
And how were your boys that were on the road with you, how were they processing this time? Have they shared that with you? Like, what impact did that time have on their lives?
I do think that our younger two that lived life out there grew and really are mature for their age, I think. Team members invested in
The
them.
influence of having young people that were a little bit older than our boys. So
They
they
were-
looked up
they
to
were
them.
cool.
They were cool, not like mom and dad, but they were saying the same things we were, or they were living the same. And so they had people. And there were some of those team members that did a great job of just really investing in.
They'll come home and go,
Right.
Joe said blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I literally just said this.
Yes.
Mom also said that, don't you remember?
And they would deny it, but yes, but I'll take it.
Yes. Was it hard for you to then come off the road? I mean, you plan on going out for 2 years, you stay for 11.
I think was hard for me is leaving Steve and Debbie.
Talk about your relationship with them.
We've known them since we've been here for, ever, but we got to know them and we did life with them, and we both went through things with our families, and it was painful to tell them.
So Steve was one of the guys who impacted me when I first came here as a college age kid. Steve's like 15 years older than me or something. And so he was one of those guys that I was really looked up to, and his teaching over the years had really impacted me. But when we got out on the road, we really saw our role as just supporting them in any way we could to help them do what they do, take a lot of the burdens off of them, both the logistical burdens. Lori would handle a lot of those, and the personal team member issues, the relational issues, take those burdens off of them so they could really focus on their teaching ministry and their ministry to the church leadership. That was really where they kind of poured themselves out. We really felt like God was leading us back off the road, back here to the home base, but really didn't have like a clear, it wasn't in writing. I sure wish it would have been, So we prayed and agonized over that decision for a long time. And then when we finally told them, man, it was like, felt like we'd gut punched them, and so that's for about a week afterwards, we kept looking at each other saying, did we make the right decision? Maybe we need to rethink this.
When you've been doing it that close knit for that long, it just was hard.
But we really did feel like God was calling us.
We know that was what God
back here. Yeah. And it's easy now to look in hindsight to see.
Sure. Way harder at the time.
That, that was the right call.
Yeah. And why did you feel called back here? What were you going to be doing back off the road?
We didn't know.
Oh, you didn't know.
It was really, the Lord was really moving us, and we were like, what's going on? So.
And then did you assume the roles then that you have now?
Basically.
These have been the hardest years for me.
Yeah.
Ever since coming off. At one point I looked at him, I said, can we go back out there?
The reward is, I really see clearly why God brought us off the road.
Yeah.
To be here, basically to help organizationally, but also help our staff. And then personally, it's been some of the hardest times, but it's also been, man, I feel like I've grown in the last few months in ways that I haven't in years, just in terms of my deepening relationship with God. Those times only come from walking through challenges, And so I've said this a dozen times in the last few months. I would not choose to go through what we have in the last year, 9 months. But looking back, I would not take it away. I thank God for every bit of it.
Why is that?
Because of just how he's walked with us through it. We were listening to a message 2 weeks ago, and the pastor made the statement talking with somebody who was going through a difficult time, and the person said, it's much better to wait with God than to wait on God. And that's what I feel like we've been doing, is waiting, but it's been with God. To sense his presence, to hear his voice in all of this has been worth it. Yeah.
I think I've been reminded who God is. Jimmy walked in and we have this letter board, and he took all the letters off and he just put same God. And that was up for a long time. And I was like, right. Like you have to remind yourself because the emotions of it hit. But I think we've been reminded a lot just how faithful he is.
Yeah. Is that why you're still here?
Well, I've asked if I could leave a couple times if you want me to be honest. And he said no, not Jimmy, God.
I kind of
think
half
so.
jokingly have said that, and not just in the last, but over all the years, I've quit 15 different times over the years.
Someone asked how we've lasted long, and we stole this from someone, but they said we've never quit on the same day. And I do think there's actually a lot of relevance to that. We just go through times where I'm just done, I'm tired or whatever.
We've wanted to quit many times. Fortunately, there's times when I've wanted to quit, and Lori said, suck it up, Buttercup, get out there. And
obviously I say that.
Yeah. Or you hand me a sandwich and say, go walk in the woods for a while,
That
which is
helps
usually
a lot.
the cure for me, because that's usually where I meet with Jesus, and he says, you can't quit. I didn't call you to that. I called you to stay here and be faithful. And
because we love it when we're in the middle of it and we're seeing lives change.
Oh,
and
yeah.
This is fun. And
Yeah.
this is what I was called to do. But there's hard times too. And that doesn't mean God's not faithful then too.
Yes.
It's the same
Right
God.
there then.
Right.
Same
It's the
God.
same God.
Yeah.
He's good all the time kind of thing.
This ministry that you poured your life into, that you've raised your family in, what do you hope for it? For like the big picture, what do you hope for it?
the vision that first drew me here, which was the vision of our founder, for a great awakening
Mm.
in our nation, which only comes from a renewal in the church, God's people living authentic Christ-like, Christ-following lives. That breaks down to individual people. I have a renewed burden and vision for revival and renewal. I don't want to just say our nation anymore. It's it's more than that, but within our culture, within the church. But specifically, like to me, it starts with our team, our staff here, our volunteers, the summer crew, the road team members, as we embrace everything that it means to surrender, follow Jesus, and live out the 7 responses that we care about, and then calling everybody that is a part of one of our events to embrace those same 7 responses, and then as we see that, prayerfully and hopefully to watch that build and grow and turn into something that just catches fire. Yeah.
I like that vision. Lori, what about you?
I think I'm a little more simplistic. I totally agree with that. I think it's not for me that we just fill a schedule. You can't measure the success by how many events we have. It's if I can just see people's lives being changed and having their God moments and it being a turning point for them, that's what I would love to see. As long as that's a consistent thing that we're seeing. If we're not doing that, then it doesn't matter if the calendar's full, but that's what I hope is that will
that's
keep
great.
going.
Years from now, when you think back and you look back, what do you want your legacy to be, Jimmy and Lori, about your ministry here?
I think I would really like for people to go, she saw me and she cared about me. She would say the hard things, but she walked life with me. That would be a win to me.
Yeah.
I think it's that the Jimmy knew and loved and followed Jesus. And he knew and loved and saw people and brought them along in the process. That's what I would hope.
I love those answers, and I can affirm that both are true. You still have many more years in this ministry, so like you can continue building on that. But and we never arrive, right? But in the short amount of time I've known you, both of those statements are true. The kids that you've served and the people you've worked with would say the same things. So you two really are part of the heart of this ministry. I think Mike said that you're not in ministry. This ministry is in you. I think that's a really good description of you both. So thank you for telling me your
Stacey.
story.
Thank you.
Joining me
Thanks for
today.
taking the time to do that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Changed Lives. If you were encouraged or inspired by what you heard, I want to invite you to take the next step. You can support the people whose story you just heard and others like them by visiting lifeaction.org/changedlives. Whether through prayer, giving, or sharing these stories, you can be part of what God is doing to revive relationships and transform lives.